Thanks for having me on, Tiffany. Really appreciate this.
Yes, I realized the other day that when I was thinking about getting ready for the podcast that we met on our first podcast a year ago. It was October of last year. It feels
Nice.
like, yeah, it feels like a million years ago. But, I thought it was cool that we're going to talk about something very different, but also spiritual. And when I first came across that you were even doing, I think the first thing that I saw on social media was you were talking about the national passport. And I remember thinking, I don't know what that is. And then my brother and I were speaking, and he started getting into this. And I was like, oh, wait, I know someone who did that. So that's why I wanted to reach out to you because, I trust you and we have a connection. And I just thought that was really interesting that you've been through this. So I really wanted you to be the one to share your experience and how you went through and what you found through living in the public or living in the private versus living in the public. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk about your experience and what you want to bring today.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much. So my name is Rachel Hope. Hope is actually an ancestor that came over on the Mayflower. So I have some family skin in the game on restoring the freedoms that we lost, that my family came over to the New World to acquire, to create, but that we've lost, that have been taken away from us as U.S. citizens. And I say us, but I am technically no longer a U.S. citizen, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. This process of moving life to the private, away from the corporate world of commerce and government, the public life, it really is a spiritual process. And you may not think about that on the surface level, but it really is, because it's about freedom and sovereignty. And the government considers all U.S. citizens to be their property, their slave. Not only that, but their dead property. So it's spiritual in nature to declare yourself, I'm alive, I'm a living woman, I'm a living man. And I'll use the words man and woman often today because that's whose rights are protected by the Constitution. Not given in the Constitution, our forefathers considered our rights to come from God, God-given rights. So the forefathers didn't give us any rights. They wanted to protect our rights from the United States, and I'll get into that. This info can really scare people. A lot of people hear this information and it brings up a lot of feelings because it's very contradictory to all the programming we've received all of our life. I know when I first heard this 2 straight weeks, every morning I woke up like, am I going to pursue this? Like, I was even too scared to search it online after a friend had given me like a full day's download of this information. But then just social media algorithms just started bringing it into my awareness. And then I realized, oh, a lot of people are talking about this. This isn't as scary as I thought. And then once I started researching, because you can look these things up, these are in the United States codes. And I will quote some of them, and I will encourage listeners to review it for themselves, because this instills not only knowledge and wisdom, but confidence is that this is real. This is not conspiracy theory. This is not things that happen behind closed doors. This is real, and this is legit. And this is a lawful and legal process to remove yourself from the jurisdiction of the United States. And as I had mentioned, this is really a spiritual process. In my opinion, we're all on the hero's journey. Life is some sort of virtual reality, video game, movie, something. And all of the best movies and video games is based on the hero's journey. The main character has some kind of flaw, as we all do, and there's a challenge to overcome. And the main character, the hero, figures it out for themselves. No one comes in and saves them. And this is what I think this process is about us saving ourselves, freeing ourselves from voluntary servitude. That is what a United States citizen is. It's a voluntary servant, a slave. But of course, we don't know that. We've been tricked into it. And the prison is unlocked. It really is. You can leave anytime you want. It's very much a prison of the mind. So it's about confidence and study and knowing in your heart that I don't have to be under their jurisdiction. I don't have to ask their permission for every little thing. They don't own me. I am not their dead entity. They made all of us into a fake, fictitious, ens legis, which is like a creature of law, all capital name version of ourselves, a corporation, a corpse. Corporation, they're dead entity. Corporations have no living life force in them, right? So this is the spiritual experience of leaving behind the association. Well, I wouldn't say leaving behind, but you distinguish between being the living man and living woman and that corporation. The corporation is there. Your all caps name has already been created. Everything you own is in your all caps name. Now, there are processes to take it out of that all caps name, such as creating a private trust, for example. We're not going to get into that today, but it is living in the private is living as the living woman or living man, not as the corporate version of yourself. So today what we're going to talk about is the difference between a U.S. citizen and a national, how to get your national passport, and how to cancel your contract with the IRS. It is a contract. The government is a corporation, and everything with the corporation is a contract. Everything with the government is a contract. So you can cancel that contract with the IRS. Most people can, probably 99% of the people listening, and I'll explain that when we get to that section today. And I want to mention that this is not tax or legal advice. This is educational purposes. Do your own research. This is what I've done, what other people have done. And I'm here to plant seeds of freedom and to help empower you to make these choices, give you resources to learn more. Don't take my word for it. I'm going to quote some USC codes today, United States codes, and I'm going to quote it slowly so you can take it in, write it down, look it up for yourself. You can put this into Google and read it for yourself, okay? So the punchline here is that being a United States citizen is optional and voluntary. You absolutely do not have to be a United States citizen. The United States, just to be really clear, is a corporation acting like government. The United States is in DC. That is the United States. We are not in the United States. There's a very big difference between the United States of America and the United States. And when I say the United States of America, the U is lowercase, the S is lowercase, and the O is lowercase. America is uppercase. And the reason I say this is because different spellings, different capitalizations all mean different things. Nobody knows that, though. Everybody assumes it to be the same thing, and it is not. This is part of their trickery and their deceit. We call it semantic deceit, trickery with words, to trick you into being in their jurisdiction, signing up for contracts you have no idea you're contracting into. And so think of the United States as a foreign for-profit corporation run by European bankers. Think of it as German Nike. That really solidifies it to me as German Nike. Well, I have nothing to do with German Nike. That's how I view the United States. They're way over. I'm here in Nevada, the non-incorporated original organic du jour, lowercase s state of Nevada, and I'll get into kind of what all that means. But they're way on the other side, and DC is just 10 square miles. That's the jurisdiction they technically have, is those 10 square miles of DC and water jurisdiction. They don't have jurisdiction over the land unless you give it to them. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So I encourage listeners right now to write this down. Go research it for yourself. 28 USC 3002 subsection 15A. 28 USC 3002 15A. It gives you the definition of the United States. It is a federal corporation. And way back when the United States was created, federal meant contract. It is a contract corporation, would be another way of thinking about that. And you want to know the location of DC? I just told you. The location of the United States, it's DC, just like I said. But you can also look that up as well in the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC 9-307, Section 8. Look that up for yourself. You will see the United States is just in DC. And so, as I said, being a United States citizen is optional and voluntary. If you were born in any of the 50 states, not DC, if you're born in any of the 50 states, you were born a national. That's what you were. You were solely a national. You were a national for a few days until your mother signed a birth certificate and it was registered. The language in that birth certificate not only gave you away to the United States, but then created an all caps version of your name. That is where your all caps name was created. And that is the beginning of the corporate version of you, the corporation. Some people call it a trust. The version of you that the United States controls, because they're a corporation and they can only control other corporations. They can only control United States corporations. They cannot control a living man or a living woman. A corporation cannot contract with a living man or living woman. They can't rule over you. That's why they create that corporate version of you, but nobody knows that, right? I didn't know that until last year. I never noticed that all my bills, my passport, my driver's license had my name written in all capital. I didn't notice that. I just took that for granted. That's a completely different version of me than the living woman. That's who they control. That's who they own, because they created it, so they control it. And there was no such thing as a United States citizen until the 14th Amendment. Everyone was just a national. The 14th Amendment was a result of freed slaves from the Civil War. It gave them a political status. I'm going to read a part of the 14th Amendment. It says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So there's two things to be a United States citizen: born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction, which means you can be born in the United States and not subject to the jurisdiction. Now, I just said, wait a minute, United States is only DC. Like, what does that mean? Well, they made incorporated franchise versions of that DC corporation and with all of the states. The state of California, the state of Nevada. That's your birth certificate, right? So you were born in the state of California. So that only exists really on paper. That is not a real place. But because your birth certificate says that, and it's an extension of the corporation in DC, they consider you born in the United States. It's that trickery, that semantic trickery. And so United States citizens are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside, and that's a capital S. Again, everything matters. Capitalization, spellings, all of that. So the capital S is the incorporated franchise version of your state. So when I said I live in the unincorporated, natural, organic, de jure Nevada state, that's lowercase s, right? That is different than there only exists in a file cabinet state of Nevada. And these things matter. These things matter because they can put you into jurisdiction or take you out of jurisdiction of the United States. So being a United States citizen is part of the feudal system that was developed in Europe when you couldn't feed your family. So you go to the Lord of a man and say, I pledge myself to you. Please give me food to feed my family. So you become their voluntary slave. And that's what a U.S. citizen is. It's like, oh, please, big daddy government, I can't protect myself. I can't think for myself. I need a business license. I need a marriage license. I can't make these decisions on my own. I need you to oversee me. That is the protection that you get from the government. But then as a result, you're a slave and they own everything you own because slaves can't own anything, including your children. And that is how CPS can come and take your children, is because they own your children through the birth certificate. When you get a marriage license, it's a threesome with the state. It's a corporation. That's what they consider marriage. It's a business. It's a corporation. The children are the product of that corporation. So they can come take your children. So a United States citizen is considered an unpaid employee of the corporation. So you have to follow all of the corporation's rules, all statutes, codes, regulations. Those are just corporate bylaws. Okay, they're not laws. But when you're a United States citizen, you're under that jurisdiction and you need to follow those rules. Otherwise, there are penalties. And quite frankly, all these codes, restrictions, regulations, they're all just ways for them to make money. They're just a for-profit corporation. Their motives are not to take care of the people, which is what it was originally set up to do. They are just creating all kinds of infractions and rules so they can collect money from you. Okay? Police are policy enforcers of the corporation. Their job is to maximize profits, is to write tickets and get money. And so this is an obvious conflict of interest when the government is trying to maximize money, but they're supposed to take care of us. This is actually how our founding forefathers set it up. We were supposed to benefit from the government. We, the people, had the power. The government is supposed to serve us. But they have flipped it over the years, taken all the power and make us serve them by paying them. The founding forefathers, they created the Constitution. It was a contract with the United States, and it was supposed to protect us from the United States getting too powerful. The United States, you could think of as like an HOA. But the states who got together, there were certain things they didn't want to do, like maybe an HOA will paint your house, take care of the lawn, things like that. So the United States was created to take care of some of these things that the states didn't want to have to bother with, like raising a military, coining money, things like that. They were given 19 powers, 19 enumerated powers. I believe I heard from David Strait that currently the United States is doing about 6,000 things. 6,000 things, and they only have an actual legit contract for 19 things. They're doing all these things so they can charge us for it. Charge the United States citizen for that, right? But they don't have an actual contract, a legit contract to do that. Here's a really important code that I would encourage listeners to write down right now. It's the definition of a national. USC 1101, section 21, okay? The term national means a person owing permanent allegiance to a state. That's the lowercase s. Okay, so sometimes nationals are called state citizens. So that would mean I owe allegiance to Nevada state, not state of Nevada, Nevada state, the Republic of Nevada, the original organic de jure, unincorporated Nevada state, that thing, not the franchise version that they created again, just on paper. It only exists on paper. Okay. And so, like I said, the forefathers, they didn't give us any rights. They just believed that our creator, whomever, whatever that is, whomever, he, she, it, the universe, source, that our creator wanted us to be free, wanted us to live our life. The forefathers did not believe in taxes. They considered that a tax on existing. They did not want that for us. You didn't have to get licenses or permits. You didn't have to go ask for permission to do anything. This is how our forefathers set up. This is how we were of a country of freedom. The nationals in the states lived under common law. It's the law of the land. There's really only 3 laws. Don't mess with somebody, don't mess with their stuff, and be honest and transparent in all of your business dealings. Basically, don't create a victim. As long as there's no victim, you haven't done anything wrong. And if you do create a victim, fix it. Reparations. It wasn't about going to jail, it was fixing it. For example, if you roll through a stop sign under common law, as long as you didn't create an accident, you didn't hurt anybody, there is no crime there. That's the difference between the United States jurisdiction, which is technically called maritime jurisdiction, and law of the land, the common law. So nationals have more rights than U.S. citizens. The Bill of Rights The first 10 amendments to the Constitution protects those rights. And the Bill of Rights only pertains to nationals. As a United States citizen, you've waived all of that. You've waived all of those rights. But of course, you didn't know that. For example, nationals have the right to bear arms. You don't need to go get a permit or a license for that. You have the right to travel. You don't need a license for that. In fact, nobody needs a driver's license unless you're engaging in commerce. And that's another conversation that we're not going to get into. And so when we live in the private, it's living man to living man, living woman to living woman, living man, living woman. This is who we interact with. That is the private world. The public world is the world of commerce and contracts, so corporation to corporation. And this is how, like I said, the United States ropes you into jurisdiction, is they have jurisdiction over that all caps name. That's who gets summoned into court, is that all caps name. So if you show up as the living woman, you've created a separation between you and the entity that actually is needing to go into court. There's various things that you can do when you go into court. We're not really going to get into that, but there's words to use to keep yourself out of court, out of jurisdiction of the court. A dear friend of mine had several judges dismiss themselves off of her case because they didn't have jurisdiction over her, because she used the correct words. Jurisdiction means right words. Juris is right law, diction is words, jurisdiction. Like, you take yourself in or put yourself in depending on the words that you use. And so being in the public is a world of contracts. And there are around 8 maxims to contracts. And one of them is, if you're not fully disclosed, if you don't know what's happening, you can break the contract. If you're not benefiting, both parties have to benefit, you can break the contract. And so when you correct your status to being a national, you go through the process of breaking various contracts with the government, which is totally legal and lawful. Because it's voluntary and optional, they do need to let you out. They need to let you go. So I'm going to move on to talking about the IRS. Were there any questions or anything you wanted to ask before we move on to that, or should I just move right on into the IRS?
Well, I did have a question about the nationals versus being a citizen. So if national is an option for us to break contract and become national, why is that option made? And like, who, as in people who live here, how did they know to become a national or that option?
Well, so remember that everybody, if you were born in one of the 50 states, was already a national. That was the original political status. So it wasn't something that anybody recently created. How did people know about it? Really smart people read original text documents. They read the original Constitution, the original Articles of Confederation, the original constitutions of the states. I'd heard that pre-COVID, there were around 45,000 nationals. And most of them were politicians and lawyers, because they knew that it gave them a layer of protection. But since COVID, this has taken off. There are now somewhere between 2 and 3 million.
Wow. Huh, that's interesting. Okay, well, go ahead, proceed.
Okay, so the IRS, this is a very exciting and interesting one. Taxes, for most people, are voluntary and optional, just like being a United States citizen. Remember that our forefathers didn't want us to have taxes. That's part of the reason they fled England to begin with. I'm going to give you some codes. Write these down. Go look them up for yourself so you can get excited about this, okay? So Title 26, also called Chapter 26 of the USC, United States Code, is the IRS code. This whole title, this whole chapter was never given an enactment clause. It was never put into positive law. That means it's not something that you must follow. So please write this down if you want to check this out. This is a website. It's a government website, USCODE, so uscode.house.gov/. Okay, that's the homepage. It lists all of the titles, all the chapters. I don't know, there's 30 plus of them. Look at 26. You will see that there's no asterisk there. Only codes that have an asterisk are positive law. If it is not positive law, that means it acts like law. It's a suggestion, but it's not actual law. And if you've been doing any kind of research into this, you know that there is no law, that people have put out $30,000 rewards. Find the law. Find the law, and you can't find the law because it doesn't exist. Here's another great code to write down and look it up yourself. 26, remember that's the IRS chapter, 26 USC 7806 subsection B. I'm abbreviating it, but they basically list all the different sections of the code. And it says, no contents of this title shall be given any legal effect. They tell you right there. Here's another place where they tell you. 26 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, 26 CFR 601.602, Section A. It's a whole paragraph, but the part that I'm extracting, reading word for word, is the tax system is based on voluntary compliance. The tax system is based on voluntary compliance. It is voluntary unless you live or work in DC, you work for the government, and that could be like you work for the county of, the state of, or if you have a corporation. Technically, the profits of a corporation is called income. So unless you work for the government, live or work in DC, or have a corporation with income, you do need to pay taxes. You can't avoid that. But if you work for the state of California and then you have a little side lawn mowing business, for example, you do not really need to pay taxes on that lawn mowing business. That is something different. And again, this is not tax advice. I'm not telling you what to do. This is just what I've learned. This is what people are doing. I've canceled my contract with the IRS. I'll talk about that in just a minute. And so as a national, your status with the IRS is a non-resident alien. Non-resident alien. So you are non-resident. You aren't in the residency. Residence has to do with where you live for employment. So if you're a California resident, then that means you live in the state of California as an extension of DC because of your job of being an unpaid employee with the United States government or corporation. So as a national, you don't live in the state of anywhere. You don't have a residence. You never have a residence. And you're alien to the citizenship of the United States, okay? Non-resident alien. After I got my passport, I think this is really funny. After I got my passport, within about 2 weeks, about a week apart, I got 2 different offers for Nevada residents, a $300 bonus if you fill out the survey. $300. I've never once received anything like this. I have no doubt this was them trying to re-enroll me back into the system.
That's funny you said that, because I was out to dinner the other night, and if the election's going on, you cannot escape anything, and they have like giant TVs everywhere of everything going on. And the governor that in my state, it was saying that he was going to offer a rebate to if you're like the head of household, single, or married, and it was like $300, and I was like, you can take that $300 and shove it right up your ass. Like, that's like a freaking insult. $300, So that's interesting. So that's how they can keep you, I guess, being in
put back into the system.
So you can leave the system. Let's just say, a person does the process of breaking the contract and becoming a national. You can sign yourself back in by doing something like that.
You have to be very aware of that. Yeah. In fact, a dear friend of mine sent in his affidavit to correct his status to being a national. And then I saw him posting on Facebook about his voting preferences. And I messaged him. I'm like, you understand you can't vote, right? He was like, oh, I thought that was the future. I'm like, well, it is the future right now. Only US citizens can vote. So there are three things that you lose when you become a national. You cannot vote, okay? But again, I look at it as like the next president is going to be the next CEO. It is a corporation. Is the next CEO of German Nike. I don't care. Okay? Can't vote. You can't get government funding for loans, student loans, and you can't hold office. Those are the things. Those are the three things that you can't do, that you quote unquote lose. But if you're getting military benefits, Social Security, Medi-Cal, Medicaid, all that kind of stuff, you don't lose that.
Okay.
Well, you don't lose that.
Where do I sign?
Sign me up. Okay, so some people feel like it's their patriotic duty and need to pay taxes. Okay. Let me alleviate you of that burden. Nothing good comes from your income taxes. All of it goes to pay interest on a loan, basically with the UN. So various times throughout history, the United States, that corporation in DC really has nothing to do with you, was bankrupt. And so they took loans to continue their business. And they've changed names. DBA is doing business. They've changed names throughout the years, right? But right now it's the United States in all capital letters, really is. And so all income tax goes to pay interest on Federal Reserve notes. So the Federal Reserve Bank is a private for-profit bank that prints Federal Reserve notes, gives them to our Treasury at an interest. Now this loan and that interest is so huge it can never be paid off. Okay, it's kind of like a Ponzi scheme. The Federal Reserve Bank is owned by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the International Monetary Fund is owned by the UN. So that's how. So it's the UN to the IMF to the Federal Reserve to the Treasury. Okay, this is really the flow of the money. So your income taxes is just money for a corporation that couldn't properly manage itself. Now, potentially they bankrupted themselves on purpose to make U.S. citizens the collateral on their loans, and ensnare them. That's potentially all true. But basically, it doesn't go to your schools. It doesn't go to your roads. If anything, that's more like your local sales tax, maybe your property taxes, but it's not your income tax. And so some of the listeners may be wondering, like, well, what about people that go to jail over taxes? Okay. There's two main issues. If you file and don't pay, that's a problem because you sign under penalty of perjury. I owe you this money. Okay, that's a contract. Or if you file fraudulent tax returns, you make things up. Okay, those are two things that you could end up going to jail over. And so it is actually, again, this is not tax advice, but potentially it's better to just not file at all. You have not made a contract for that year. You haven't told them that you owe them anything. Okay. Now, if you start paying taxes, and I say if because it's voluntary, you can't legally just stop paying taxes. You do have to sever that contract. If you had never paid taxes ever in your life, you didn't do anything wrong. And some people have done that. But once you start paying, you cannot just stop paying technically. So you want to revoke your election to pay. It's an election. It is a choice. Okay, that's what the document is called that you send into the IRS. Revocation of election. And there's no specific wording that you have to say on this document other than it's an affidavit, which means it's your truth and you sign it under penalty of perjury. Personally, I put under penalty of perjury under the laws of the United States of America, to differentiate between the United States, keep myself as much away from them as I can. So you put some skin in it. So I'm perjuring myself if any of this is incorrect. And I wrote various things about how it's not positive law, it's voluntary and optional, it's color of law, it's not in fact law. I'm a national. The tax code is a suggested tax code for U.S. citizens only. You know, I quoted some of these codes that I gave you earlier. Notarized it, sent it certified mail. I sent it to my local IRS agent and also to the IRS commissioner in DC. And you want to send things always certified mail whenever interacting, so that you have proof of tracking, proof that they received it. Any affidavit becomes truth in law if it's not rebutted. That's why it's a very, very powerful document, an affidavit, which is your truth statement signed under penalty of perjury before a notary. Okay, it's a very, very powerful document. So technically, if you send out an affidavit, the receiving party gets 21 days. I was very generous and I gave the IRS 30 days to rebut it. I never heard back. So it's an unrebutted piece of evidence in any court of law that I don't owe taxes, that I'm done with that. And they are not going to rebut it. And the reason is the IRS cannot rebut it because I sent it in as a living woman. That was part of my verbiage. I'm a living woman. I'm not a corporation. I'm not a dead entity. So the IRS cannot interact with me because I'm a living woman. So a living man or living woman from the IRS would have had to send an affidavit back, signing under penalty of perjury. So if they had tried to say anything I said was untrue, now they would have been lying and they would have been risking jail time. And so this is why affidavits are not rebutted when you send them to the government. Unless, of course, you do say something fraudulent, then yeah, they may rebut that. But as long as everything you say is truthful, they're not going to rebut that. So now I have an actual document. I have evidence that I don't owe taxes.
And we talked about this before too. Like you're not going to get anything back, a rebuttal, and you're also not going to get a like confirmation either. Like, okay, we accept that. It's just kind of like whatever.
Yeah, so I didn't get anything back. I've heard sometimes you get a form letter of like, we need 30 days to review this. But what I've heard you can do is put a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act. You can put a FOIA request and check to see that your status has been corrected with the IRS. I haven't done this because I'm not worried about that. Should they ever contact me in the future, I have this evidence. And from what I've heard is as long as you know what you're talking about, they leave you alone. Like I personally know somebody else who was getting harassed by the IRS. She sent them a 1-paragraph letter along the lines of what I just said. Look, I'm a living woman. I'm not a United States citizen. I only owe allegiance to my creator. You can make it very spiritual. It doesn't have to be political. She didn't quote any of the code. She's like, I don't want to use their language. And they never contacted her again. They let her go. So you just have to show that you know what you're talking about. And then in general, they will let you go. Now, if you owe back taxes, if you've filed previous years and you said that you owe this money, from what I've heard is if it's over $50,000, they're not as likely to let you go so easily. Also with getting your passport, your national passport, if you owe over 50 grand, and that's only because you filed and said you owed it. Has nothing to do with how much compensation. I try not to use commercial terms, right? How much compensation or private property you have. It has nothing to do with that. It's if you told them that you owed that, right? So that could be an issue. Joe Lustica is one of the resources that I gave you that I think you're going to be kind of listing out for your listeners. He has a method supposedly of how to endorse a bill, endorse with an I, the bill that the IRS sends to you to authorize them to just go ahead and take it out of your Lustica trust, a trust that was created with your all caps name because all bills are prepaid. That's beyond introductory beginning level, which is where I want to keep it right now. But even if you do owe, there are potentially resources and remedies for that. So, just do some research, get in there. There is recourse. There are remedies. And these financial remedies are because we don't have any real money. All of our silver and gold was taken away. Everything we work with, Federal Reserve notes, are just promissory notes. When you give someone $20, you're basically saying, I owe you $20. None of it is real money. So they had to give us remedies in order to actually discharge debts. Again, we're not going to get into that, but that's a very exciting realm that people are getting loans paid off and going to dealerships and walking away with cars without taking any of their own Federal Reserve notes to do that. So I'm self-employed, so this was a really easy process for me. But if you are employed, you're going to need to also work with your employer to stop being a voluntary withholding agent for the IRS. A great way to do that is a tax form called the W-8BEN. Fill that out. I'm not going to get into how to fill that out. There are various videos online. I do recommend a teacher called Brandon Joe Williams, and in his 2.0 course, video 4, I think, goes over how to fill it out. Brandon Joe Williams has a first course and a second course. I believe the first course is more beginner friendly, but it goes on a lot of tangents and long videos. So I think if you read the national theory page on his website and follow along with 2.0, I think you'll do really great. If you're a beginner, 2.0 is a little advanced. He's passionate. He gives it all away for free. He's extremely intelligent. He's a little bit vulgar. That's his teaching style. So just look past that. And he's got a heart of gold. Like, he really just wants to plant seeds of freedom for his brothers and sisters. He likes vulgarity. He's trying to bring light to the whole subject. So his website is onestupidfuck.com. But it's free. It's free, valuable resources that lists it all, tells you a lot of information in a logical, easy to follow format. I was pretty lost until I found him, because I was like trying to watch various videos from this teacher and that teacher, and it just felt really overwhelming until somebody finally just kind of like broke it all down for me. So I do recommend his courses. And he also recommends, if the W-8BEN won't work, like if your employer refuses to take it, they're just very by the book, very in the matrix. A W-4, fill out a new W-4 and write exempt in it. You can also just create an affidavit. You can give your employer an affidavit and be like, look, this is between me and the IRS. That's basically what canceling the W-4 contract is. This is like, you're out of it, your employer. You're out of it. You have nothing to do with it anymore. It's between me and the IRS. And with the W-8BEN, you could fill it out with your name as the living woman or as your all caps name. According to Brandon, if you fill out your all caps name, they're still going to take Social Security out. So when you fill it out as the living woman or living man, then they don't take the Social Security out. So, do some research into that, see what feels right. There's one thing I really want to say right now. There is no one way to do all of this. There really isn't. And some people get really caught up on like, am I going to do the wrong thing? Is this the right way?
That's right.
There you go. There are many different ways to do this path. And according to Brandon, you can fill out forms however you want. You can scratch things off, So, and just like with the revocation election, there's no like specific words you have to put into it other than the gist of, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not a United States citizen. Or even if you are a United States citizen, I want to make that clear. You do not have to be a national to cancel your contract with the IRS. As long as you don't live or work in DC or work for the government or have an income from a corporation, you can send in your ROE. So you wouldn't put in there, I'm not a United States citizen. You would put, it's voluntary and optional. I'm not participating anymore, something like that. Yeah. I'm going to move on to the passport, unless you have any questions about that, anything about the IRS.
Nope, you did great. Thank you.
Okay, great. And just for the listeners, I did give Tiffany a lot of resources, and at the top of those resources, I gave you the documents that I sent in to the IRS. You can use that as a template, write your own. There's a really great document in the resources that I gave to Tiffany called 100 Reasons Why I Don't Owe Taxes. And that is somebody else's ROE that they sent in, their truth affidavit. So I took a bunch of their points, plus things I'd learned from other teachers and other videos. I used a little bit of help. Brandon Joe Williams. And then I created my own. I think it's important to create your own. Don't just use exactly what somebody else sends it. Make it your own, even if you only change it a little bit. But you want to make it your own, and always, always comprehend, understand every single word. Don't send any affidavit in if you don't fully get what everything means, okay? So even if that means you need to rewrite it into language that you feel comfortable with, that's really, really important. Okay, so we're going to move on to the passport now. Getting a national passport is the only official documentation that you can have that you're a national. You don't need a passport in order to correct your status to a national, but it's nice to have that documentation, especially if a police officer pulls you over. You can give them your passport card and they run it, and it will say something along the lines of restricted, do not stop, do not detain, lifetime concealed permit. Basically, they don't have jurisdiction over you unless you created a crime, unless you created a victim. But if you just, drove 30 in a 25, even if you drove 80 in a 25, now we don't want to be reckless, right? We do want to live with integrity and honor as a national. So I would not recommend doing something like that. But even if you did, technically there was no crime, unless of course you hit somebody. So the way you correct your status to being a national is you send an affidavit to the Secretary of State at the State Department in DC. Currently, his name is Anthony Blinken. That's where you send it to. So again, my affidavit is in the resources, so you can see exactly what I sent in. It was based off of an affidavit that was shared with me that many people have used. I changed it around, tweaked it a little bit. I added in verbiage about being a living woman. One thing that I did not put in there that I'd recommend listeners put in if you're going to do this process is that you're at peace with the United States. You're basically asking them to, in your file, update you to a diplomat, a foreign diplomat, because you are now foreign to the United States. The United States of America is foreign. So if you put something in the lines, and it must be truthful. Everything needs to be truthful. I'm at peace with the United States. I wish no harm to anyone, right? Everyone is my brothers and sisters, something like that. So they know that you're not a threat. I think that's something helpful to put in there. I did put that in with my affidavit to the IRS. I'm at peace with the United States, at peace with the IRS, I'm not a tax protester, like a lot of this is you want to be gentle and kind, non-combative. You don't want to create issues. That's is when they can ensnare you, put you into court, is when there's some dishonor. So you just want to be respectful with the police officer. Always. And so in my affidavit, I just basically wrote I was a living woman. I was not a corporation, not a trust. I gave the definition of a national, kind of just proved that being a national exists, that to be a United States citizen, there's two parts of it is born there, plus having the jurisdiction. So I just kind of broke that down. Send it in certified mail. You can also send it in registered mail. You can also send your ROE in to the IRS with registered mail. The registered mail is from the original organic de jure postal office, right? The certified mail is the corporation, the corporate version of the post office. But both work. Both create tracking. The Secretary of State or an agent on behalf of the Secretary of State did not pick my letter up from the post office for a good 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks, it was not delivered. So just be aware of that it may take a while. You think certified should be in a couple days, but it took 2 weeks. I never got the signature card back. I've heard they're just not doing it. I think also there's too many people doing this. We don't want to sign thousands of them every day. So I did go to the post office and ask them to print me out a copy of the signature that says the Secretary of State's office, the State Department, on behalf of the Secretary of State, received my affidavit. And so the clock started ticking as soon as they signed for that, 21 days. They had 21 days to rebut my affidavit that I was a national and not a United States citizen. And I never heard back. And same thing, like I said, with the revocation of election with the IRS, they're not going to rebut it because the State Department cannot rebut it because they're a corporation. Everything about the government is a corporation. Banks are a corporation. Post office is a corporation. Courts are a corporation. Everything is, right? I mean, any kind of contract with them. So they, as the State Department, they can't rebut it. It would need to be a living man or a living woman, stick their neck out, risk perjury and going to jail in order to rebut anything I wrote. And everything I wrote in my affidavit was true. So technically, after 21 days, I was now officially a national. I recommend that you sign with a human signature. Just don't sign with your all caps. Don't sign all capital letters. The human signature is technically use all lowercase letters. Now, if you use uppercase for the first letter, lowercase, that still is different than all uppercase. But the human signature is all lowercase. Rachel, let's see, dash, Hope, colon, Fowler. Fowler is my actual last name. And then you write, it's a good idea to write without prejudice afterwards, or UCC 1-308. Without prejudice means I'm not waiving any of my rights. U.S. citizens waive their rights, right? So it's like I'm claiming all of my rights. You can't take any of them away. And now this affidavit is going to be included in with your passport application. You can use the DS-11 or the DS-82. Those are two different applications. The 11 is a brand new passport. So if you've never had a passport before, you would use that. Or if you want to open a brand new file separate from your US citizen passport, you can use a DS-11. That's what I did. It's a much more involved process. I just wasn't familiar at that time that you could use a DS-82. Or I'd heard people talk about that, but they encouraged you to kind of lie and say, oh, I lost my passport. And I just didn't want to lie about anything. And that's really important. But you can also use the DS-82, which is a renewal. But you must include your U.S. citizen passport with it to send it in. So in the resources that I gave Tiffany, there's a few different videos on how to fill this out. There's a website called coppermoonshinestills.com. He's kind of the OG in this field of how to get the passport. So I'm not going to go over it word for word on how to fill out the application, but I will give you some of the key things that you definitely do not want to mess up on. Use black ink. That is because those are their instructions. You must use black ink. Do not do this online because they won't let you online fill out the special characters that you need to fill out. So print it out, or even better, go to the post office and get the application. Get several of them so you can do some rough drafts, because you cannot do any scratch outs. Everything has to be perfect. So if you make any mistakes, you got to start all over. So get a few, make a rough draft, get it all figured out exactly how you want to do it, and then be very careful how you fill out the final one that you're going to send in. The most important thing is no to U.S. citizen. No to U.S. citizen for everything. The DS-11 asks about a spouse, your parents, all of that. No. And the reason why that is truthful is because it was not a U.S. corporation that raised you. You did not marry a U.S. corporation. It was a living man and a living woman, or one of them. You married a living man. You married a living woman. Remember, I'm always going to use man or woman. I'm not going to use any gender fluid terms, because only men and women have their rights protected with the Constitution. So if you put X for gender on your passport application, they may deny you the national passport. Got to pick one or the other. So just keep that in mind. This is not a political thing, but just to keep you protected. So no to U.S. citizen. If you don't do anything else, no to U.S. citizen. Okay. When they ask for your permanent address, all addresses put you in their jurisdiction. All addresses with a zip code, they created the zip code. So what people do, this is what I did, is you put in rural free delivery. This was the delivery method way back in the day before there were addresses. So you put rural free delivery. You can literally write rural free delivery on the address line. The city, I put non-domestic. And for the zip, I put all zeros, and I put them in brackets. That's an extra layer of protection. So brackets is when you put something on an official document for informational purposes only, but not for actual purposes. So when you mail something and you put your return address, you can put brackets around your zip code, which means like, hey, I'm taking it off this envelope, so I'm not giving you jurisdiction, but just for information, here it is. So rural free delivery, I wrote non-domestic for the city, 0000 for the zip in brackets. You don't have to do the brackets, it's just another layer of protection. For mailing address, in care of. When you write in care of for mailing address, you are not admitting to living there. And I wrote my actual, domicile. It's not my residence, my domicile here in Reno, Nevada. I wrote that, but I wrote in care of. So it's like, hey, I'm not admitting to living there. So I didn't contract in. And then when it asks for your social security, now some people don't want to use their social security, and some people say like, oh, if you use that, you're going to get a U.S. citizen passport. But the way people feel about it right now is, well, you could try, but they may take your whole $300 and not give you a passport if you don't put your social there. So just go ahead and put your social and put it in brackets. Again, it's informational purposes only, so you know exactly who I am, but I'm not giving you jurisdiction through that social security number. Don't sign the application. If you do the DS-11, you have to go in, sign it there. If you do the DS-82, you can just mail it in, you can sign it. It's good to sign it without prejudice. Again, I'm not waiving in my rights. I'm not a U.S. citizen. I'm a national. And include your affidavit. You might call this the explanatory statement. I didn't retitle it to explanatory statement. I just gave an exact copy, but an original notarized wet ink signature of the affidavit I sent to the Secretary of State. So it was already on file. And this helped me when I was working with the passport agent, because she thought it was weird, everything that I had filled out. She'd never seen that before. In fact, she had her supervisor go call the State Department to like try to figure out what to do. And so what helped is that I showed them the affidavit. I'm like, look, the State Department's had this for at that point, it had been over a month. And they never rebutted it. So, I'm not a United States citizen, because they was like, well, you have to be a United States citizen to get a passport. I'm like, no, you don't. And then I actually showed them in the signature line area, you're taking an oath that says, look, I'm a U.S. citizen or a non-citizen national. So I said, look right there, non-citizen national. This is what I'm signing up for right here. So that helped me to have that affidavit. I expedited mine. It was an extra $60. So I got my passport in like 10 days. The card came about a week later. I got the card in the book. I have yet to have a run-in with any police officer, so I have not tested that. Not inviting that in, but just kind of saying I have not verified mine. But the fact that I sent in an affidavit saying I'm not a U.S. citizen, wrote no to everything, and sent me back a passport is my evidence that I got that passport, because it looks exactly the same. It's just encoded in it. Like when when you're traveling and they run it and things like that, like it has different information in it. And really this is what I had planned to share. I wanted to keep it not too overwhelming, user-friendly for beginners, with some action points that you can go and take right away. And we're exactly at an hour, so that was my goal. Any questions or comments, Tiffany, about anything?
First of all, you gave so much information. That was awesome. It was really great because, when you do go to find, when you try to research, like, what do you have to do this first? Do you have to do that first? It's tricky to understand that. So that was nice to know. With the IRS, if you decide that you wanted to be a citizen, right there, you don't have to do both things. But I did want to ask you about being a national versus citizen, but like besides, if we run into the law to be able to give identification that way, like, hey, this person, like, don't really, engage with this person so much, right? What else do you get for being a citizen? I mean, I'm sorry, a national. Like, what else does that set you up for? Which I know we're not going to get into today, but what else gets you with being a national versus a citizen?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So it's a layer of protection in living in the private. There are various layers of protection. You do not have to declare your status to being a national in order to live in the private, but it's another layer of protection. But for example, if you wanted to remodel your bathroom, you just remodel your bathroom. You don't have to go and get a permit and things like that. Now, when you go to sell your house, that might be an issue. But what you could do is restore the original land patent to your property, which is taking the government out of it. They can never come and seize it from you. And you do decontract with the county, so you don't owe property taxes. But then, depending on the county, depending on the state, you may need to go re-sign up with some of the utilities and things like that. So there are other ways of living in the private, but again, being a national is just one of the layers of protection. It is recommended that you declare your status to being a national before you start to attempt discharging your debt. For example, getting loans paid off, getting credit cards paid off. I've heard of people that get their credit card discharged every month, which basically means they just have unlimited money. Whatever they spend on their credit card, they get the bank to take it out of their Lustica trust, and then they just do it all over again. So it is recommended to do that first because it takes you out of jurisdiction of the United States. So if you want to convert your corporation into a PMA, a private membership association, it might be really wise to be a national first, so you're taking yourself out of jurisdiction of that corporate world. So I don't think you have to be a national to live in the private. Like I keep saying, it's just a layer of protection. And it's an extra layer of protection with the IRS beyond just, hey, it's optional. It's also like, it doesn't apply to me as a national. So I like that. Helps me to sleep better at night. And spiritually, I didn't really get into this at all, but I believe the elites are very, very evil. I believe worldwide they have a religion that serves the dark side. And I absolutely do not want them to say that they own me. Yeah. I want to be as far away from them as possible. So it helps me to sleep better at night that I feel I've extracted myself even more from the slave matrix. I used to be really sad about this and resistant to life. Oh, I lost you. Wait till you come back. So let me just restate this one point. I don't know if you heard it or not, but to me, it's important. This is something that I haven't really touched on today at all, is that I do believe the elites of the world who run the governments have a religion that serves the dark side. I really do. Mm-hmm. And I do not want to have anything to do with them. I want to be as far away from them as I possibly can. I do not want them, especially them, to say that they own me and that I'm their dead fictitious entity. They consider you dead and lost at sea. That is not me. So I sleep better. I feel like there's spiritual implications that I freed my soul, and I have no idea what implications this might have on other realms of existence. Earth is a video game. Earth very well might be a training game for other realities and other dimensions. I know I'm getting a little woo-woo here, but who knows? Who knows? Anything is possible. So I feel like there are very important ramifications of saying no No, no, no. I own myself. You do not. I feel like that's really, really important. Um, and the last thing I'd really like to say, which I said earlier, was the prison is unlocked. It really is. When I was first getting into this information and still a little bit afraid, I had a dream. I went to go visit somebody in jail, and all of a sudden I was in jail. All of a sudden I had the orange jumpsuit on and I was behind bars. But I didn't freak out at all because I just knew the door was going to be unlocked. And it was. And I walked right out. The door's unlocked. You can cancel the contract. You can leave. And they need to let you go. Even though they threaten that they have all this power and all this authority, they only have that if you give it to them. And they will lie and deceive and coerce because they lack ethics. But as long as you've done your research, you feel it in your heart. This is very much like it's a spiritual, it's a personal experience. It's not just about that affidavit. It's knowing like, look, you don't own me. You don't control me. I'm free to live my life as my creator created that for me, whomever or whatever that is. This is not about what religion is correct. We're all here for some reason. We all got created from something. Personally, I think we're all divine sparks of a one creator, and there's no separation. We're all the same being, just pretending to be different beings so that we can have an interesting video game. But it's very much a process of like, I get to live my life. I have those freedoms. I'm declaring it. And this is something that really bothered me for a long time. I knew for years that we lived in a sort of prison matrix planet. But how could we get out? These are the most powerful people in the world, and people end up missing and dead. But this is a legal and lawful way. We're not protesting. We're not showing up with guns. We're just filing paperwork to say, hey, you stay over there. I'm going to stay over here. I wish you well. You know, it's legal and lawful. Legal is their world. Lawful is God's law, is God's world. Common law is based on that idea that we have a creator, a God that just wanted us to be good to others. Just don't create victims and everything is fine. And so this process is the most meaningful thing to me I've ever studied in my life. And I've studied all the woo-woo things, been to various countries for plant medicines. I do inner child emotional trauma healing for a living, which is very fascinating. And, you know, I love supporting my clients. But to me, this is it. This is the most important thing, is freedom, actual freedom. So I'm passionate about it and happy to share this information. And that's really that kind of the bottom line that I want to leave with everybody, is this is important, very important.
It is. And I'm just starting my journey on it as well. Like it just kind of, I feel like it finds you, you know, when you're ready, you know, like the opportunity presents itself, right? And you can obviously be like, yeah, this is too much work, or you can be intrigued by it and be like, this sounds like this is right up my alley and this is where I want to go. And because it is a lot of work and it does take a lot of time, but you know, I have like a handful of people that I, like you included, right, that I can reach out and speak to people when I get stuck on something or I'm just not sure of things. And the whole process has really reminded me of the Devil Tarot card, where it's the devil and, you know, there's like a man and a woman underneath the devil, and he has chains from him and they're around the necks of the people, but the chains are loose. So that's the point of the card, is all you have to do is take the chains off and you're free. Like they're an illusion. It's not really, you're not really chained to anything. It's that you free yourself from things. And of course we come across people along our path who can help us and guide us on things, but ultimately you have to do the work. Like you are your person, like you are the one. And and you know, just a couple other quick things that I know we're not going to get into, but I wanted to touch on, and just so the listeners know, when we talked about all caps name, that is something that we get from our birth certificate, that when we, you know, when our mom signs off, like that is the name correct? I just wanted to make sure before we get that.
That's the origination of it. Yeah. She's actually giving you to the state. She of course doesn't know that.
Right. Because I did it and I wouldn't have done that if I knew it.
and she's basically signing a contract, but she just delivered. She's probably on pain drugs. She's not in a state to actually sign a contract. That's one of the parts of the contract, is you have to be in a state of mind that you are able to contract. And a woman right after birth is not really in that state of mind. So it's another level of deceit and trickery, and they don't fully disclose what it means, which is another breach of contract.
I mean, we could go real far into that, and not that we're going to, but just all of that. Like, I didn't know, I had my first child was 8 years ago. My second one was 6 years ago. And I'm just different than where I was then. I didn't know. They asked me, oh, do you want this vaccine, this, that? I'm like, okay, is that what they're supposed to have? Like, okay. And, oh, okay, I have to sign this certificate. Okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. And it is this part of our life. And it's not even necessarily the hospital's fault either. Like, they're just the employees doing their job. Like, who questions these things, And it's just really important that now we're questioning, and we should question that. And then I know from also when we come out, right, and from our birth certificate, we get our social security number. And I wanted to touch on that just for a minute and not get deep into it. But that's what sets up our trust, right? The trust that the government sets up in our name. So like if we were to, die, or they were to kill us in the Maui fires or some terrible hurricane, right? Like they claim that money. Is that correct?
I'm honestly not sure if the Sesticate Trust set up in our name comes from the all caps name or if it comes from the Social Security. I think that it could come just from the all caps name if you never get a Social Security, but the two are very linked. And some people have the opinion it's not the worst thing in the world to get a birth certificate and a Social Security for your child, because then you are allowing the government to create this trust that they're the beneficiary of, that they potentially can pull millions of dollars out of. And I know this probably sounds really wild to the listener, but the government creates these trusts based on our all caps names, and then puts money into them, because the government just prints money out of thin air. Anytime we charge, we get a loan, a bank account, credit card, all that, that actually creates money. And they put that into the trust. And then they also, if we go to college, if we have a great job, if we make a lot of money, if we've served in the military, if they deem us a valuable person of society. And again, I never touched on that, but person has a lot of different definitions. You have to be kind of careful about what that means. But if they consider you valuable, they put more money into that trust, and you're the beneficiary of it. They just don't tell you it exists. Your Social Security, the Medi-Cal, Medicaid, it's welfare, all that comes from that trust. It's not other taxpayers that pay that. It all comes out of that trust. So potentially it's not the worst thing in the world to get those things for your child, because a lot of people are learning how to access funds from that. So your child can have that, figure out how to access funds from it, and then just correct their status. So for listeners who are worried, like, oh, what should I do? I'm pregnant, or it isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world.
That's true that you brought that up, because I thought about that the other day, and I was thinking, okay, well, if my child didn't have a birth certificate or a social security number, good grief, they might not have that trust, right? Because if you don't have those things, then you have nothing from the government, right? So it's interesting. And that was one last question I wanted to ask too. So when the government, when we start breaking our contracts and stepping away from the government, do you think they care, or they're just like, see you later? Do you think if a mass exodus starts leaving and, doesn't file taxes and doesn't become citizens, and, they become nationals, and they look into, how you're talking about, like protecting our assets through trusts and doing those things in the private, what do you think will happen? Do you think they'll stop that, or do you think they'll change things, or is it going to be not enough people who are really going to wake up to it to where it really makes a difference to them?
Well, that's a great question. I don't think they can stop it. because it's all contracts, and contracts can be broken. They may threaten and coerce and make it really difficult, which could make it a scarier process. I don't think they would do that until a lot of people start doing this. And there's a lot of forward momentum. And there's a lot of people who know nothing about this whole process but are sick of taxes.
Well, that's always cracks me up. I'm into a lot of different things, right? And like when I talk about those things to my friends, all my friends listen to me, what all the crazy things that I do. But almost every single one of them, when I got to talk about taxes, they're like, okay, we don't care that you drink your own urine, Tiffany, but when you figure out not how to not pay taxes,
Right?
let me know. Like, okay.
I mean, people kill themselves over it. For a lot of people, it's the difference between thriving and really suffering in life.
Yeah.
And that none of that goes to better our society. And it's not what our founding forefathers wanted for us. And, the way that the United States government prints money out of thin air and gives it to all this foreign aid, but could care less about what's going on for the people here that they're supposed to take care of, to me, it's a no-brainer. To me, it's a no-brainer. Like, let me take care of myself because you're not taking care of me. It's supposed to be a trustee beneficiary relationship where the government is the trustee, and I'm the beneficiary. Same thing when you go into a court. You're supposed to be the beneficiary and the judge is the trustee, which means they have an obligation to do what's best for you, to take care of you, which they don't do anymore. But that's part of enforcing your rights, is enforcing that trustee role. So if the government cracked down on these things, in my opinion, it would just require more study, more steadfastness, and to have that courage that if they threaten and coerce, and I say threaten and coerce because, for example, when you go to court, a judge is going to ask you, do you understand? Don't ever say that. When you say understand, you're putting yourself under the judge. They have authority over you. And I've heard stories of judges threatening, like, if you don't understand, I'm going to hold you in contempt. I'm going to put you in jail, all of this. And you just have to hold strong. Yeah. So this is what could happen, but I'd like to put it out into the universe that it's going to continue to be easy, because there needs to be a remedy to all the slavery that's happened. I'd like to think that there are balancing forces in the universe, and that the dark side has had a lot of power for a long time because we've given it to them. And now that we're waking up to it, we're taking the power back. And so I'd like to put that out. I'd like to put that out of the universe, that it's continued to be an easy process. And I say easy as in they let you go. It's not easy to do the research, to do the study, to deal with the emotions, the fears that come up. It's like, oh, am I really going to notify the IRS? Am I really going to shake the boat? Admittedly, that was the tougher one for me to do. And I gave a workshop on this at a really cool music festival called High Vibe Fest. And I wanted to be able to tell everybody that I'd done it. I didn't want to teach anything to anybody that I hadn't done myself. And so that was the impetus of okay, I got to do this. And they never heard back. And that's just because of my fears. Freedom is the most important thing to me. So being put in jail it'd be worse than dying to me. It really would.
That's very true. And you just made me think, I remember my brother was saying, he took his affidavit to get notarized, and he went to a bank and the bank would not do it. Mm-hmm. And so he had to kind of face some fears too, and to stand on his own square, and he left because the bank would not do it. Even, when he said a couple things back, and they were like, no. So just for listeners too, if, you're living in the United States, an easier place to do that is UPS store. I've heard if you go to the UPS store, or if you have a friend or a family member who does notary. But I was just, for his experience and just knowing, I think going through this, this process, right, to know that you might hit roadblocks. And if you hit the roadblocks, right, you just have to kind of go back and reach out to more people, look up some different resources. There's so many, I mean, you gave so many resources, Rachel. Like, I want to go through all them, and I'm going to put that all in the description of the video. And then I also want to touch on one other thing, because someone asked me to ask this, that if this was just for the United States. So we're in the United States, so we're just speaking on the United States. But I saw on one of your resources, you had something in there, if you were not from the United States, that there were some other resources that you could look into, someone could look into.
Yeah, so that link, I didn't think gave a lot of information, but Brandon had put it on his website if you are not born in the I'm just going to say the United States of America. But what I've heard is there is a process to naturalize, and then you can declare yourself a national. I don't know about this, much about this, but if you are a United States citizen from another country, the optional tax code would apply to you. Can you declare your status to a national? Again, that'd be a process of naturalization. When you naturalize, you generally can just say, hey, I belong to this group. Like, it's sort of like by any means necessary. I mean, you can just like declare. So supposedly there's this process where you can just declare yourself to be a part of the national group. I know I'm not giving a great answer here because I just don't know what it is. These are just little bits and tidbits that I've heard, but this does spark something else. This process of being a national does exist in other countries as well. Okay. The UN and the IRS, they have their hands all over in the world. The IRS is a private for-profit debt collection agency, operates out of Puerto Rico, and collects for other countries around the world. This is not just a scam here in the US. Basically, almost no country in the world makes their own money. It all comes from the International Monetary Fund, something like that. And a lot of the countries that we're at war with that need freedom, how dare they? They want to actually make their own money. But then we say there's weapons of mass destruction or something like that, right? So this scheme has been perpetuated all around the world. It's not just the United States. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there, that listeners maybe in other countries, that your country may have your own version of this, of how to declare yourself a national and cancel a contract with the IRS.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, seriously, thank you for all of your information. I just really appreciate it. And I'll put your description, if your contact information, if you want, in the description too, if you want to help somebody or if they need help, or I won't. So I can edit.
Yeah, you can put my email, not my phone number, but you can put my email.
No, I will not do that. But thank you so much, Rachel. And I hope, honestly, in the next few months, with both of us doing some research, we might be able to come back on and talk about even more in-depth things like protecting our assets through trust and things like that.
Those are my next moves, is I want to figure out the trust, because my bank account is in my all caps name, which means the government at any point, if they wanted to, could just go take it. My car is, when you register a car, you give it to the state. They could come and take it at any point, unless you put in a trust. So those are my next moves, is I do want to create a trust to protect my assets. And then I want to use more language in Rachel Hope Healing, where I help my clients, that moves it toward a PMA, private membership association. So it's me, a living woman, interacting with other living women and other living men, not the corporate version of me. So those are my next two steps. And I've got a dear friend who's working on discharging debt. And he says he's close to cracking it. And I really want to study that as well down the road.
Yeah, that's what's pretty cool about it, is I have ideas of what I want to do, about like, discharging my mortgage. That would be awesome. Then I could just have way more time. I wouldn't have to work, a typical 9-to-5 job, right? I just have so much more time. So that's going to be down the road. And so that's what I really appreciate about you coming on today, is about the first couple steps that a person needs to take to get the ball rolling on being a sovereign individual.
I'd recommend these steps. And another really easy one is canceling your voter registration.
You know what? I wanted to ask you, because I was going to do that the other day, and I was like, do I need to do this? I'm not sure. Do you have to cancel that through like every state that you've lived in, or is it just the most recent?
I have.
Everyone that you've lived in?
Might as well be thorough. Do you have to? I don't know. But with every one of those states, you told them you were a U.S. citizen when you registered.
Okay. So it's just kind of cleaning up the loose ends and stuff.
Yeah, and at some point you might want to clean up the driver's license contract, either give it away, like give it back to them, unregister your car, but that's a whole nother thing. I put rural free delivery for the address and care of for mailing address and put no for U.S. citizens. So I cleaned it up a little bit. I don't plan on ever using that. But if you want to rent a car, you do need a driver's license.
Yeah, that's true. Well, maybe we'll come back to each other in a few months and we'll see what else we found out.
That sounds good, Tiffany. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to more collaborations.
All right. Same. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye.